Good morning, everybody. Tamara will be with us in just a moment. So I'm here with David. Hey, David.
Hi, how are you, Robbie?
I'm great. Thanks for asking. So you have a guest, right?
Yeah, well, we talked about this last week about getting some attention for Reverend Wimbish's campaign for district attorney in the four counties south of Clayton, Fayette, Pike, Spalding, and Upton. And we have a guest from one of the county's campaign coordinators for uh, Reverend Wimbish's campaign, Mr. Albert Solomon, and he's going to join us right now, I think. There he is.
Okay.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I am doing well this morning. Just finished up a virtual parade to the polls event here in Spalding this morning.
And that looks like we have Reverend Wimbish with us.
Morning.
Good morning, sir. So, can you tell us what made you decide to run, and why you think this is something that progressive folks should be paying attention to? I think that's a good place for us to start.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here this morning. I got involved in this race when I found out that we were going to have an unopposed appointed incumbent run for district attorney in this area. I learned last week that it's been 21 years since they've actually had a candidate run against a district attorney in this district, and the incumbent was appointed last year to serve out the term of her boss, Ben Coker, who became a Superior Court judge. And that term was to last the remainder of the 2 years. But fortunately, Deborah Gonzalez, the first Latina district attorney up in Athens, Georgia, was able to get a law overturned, a 2018 law overturned and declared unconstitutional, saying that the will of the people must be respected and that the governor does not have the right to appoint somebody to serve out that length of term when it's an elected position. And so when the announcement was made here, there was going to be a special election for the Griffin Circuit DA, I felt it was my responsibility to make sure that people had the opportunity to have a choice to be heard. We shouldn't be forced to allow partisan politics to fill a position so critical as DA without the people having the opportunity to have a voice in that election. So that's why I got involved.
Great. And how has the campaign been going? What's been your strategy, and who is being mobilized to bring up this challenge that you have to this appointment, top down kind of race that it was supposed to be?
Well, it's interesting, as you say, a top-down kind of appointment. We're running a grassroots campaign, but we're running a grassroots campaign that's grounded in social media, grounded in virtual activities, and grounded in actual ground game, getting out, touching people, making contact with them in those four counties. These Spalding and Fayette County are two counties there. Fayette's already trending blue. Spalding is headed in that direction. So we've got a lot of excitement in these counties about this race. We've probably got 100 volunteers now lined up. We got virtual phone base going. We send out text messages. We're doing everything we can to touch people. And Mr. Solomon and his ground crew, they're in the street passing out flyers and literature, talking to people, placing yard signs. One of the challenges that we're facing is that this election, there's not a lot of media coverage about it. And nobody really knows anything. A lot of people don't know there's an actual election going on. So we faced that challenge and also the challenge of voter fatigue. just coming out the presidential election and Senate runoff, people are sort of inundated with politics for the last 6 months, and so there is a level of voter fatigue that we've had to overcome. But I think we're doing a great job of getting the message out that this is an election that we can win, and this is an election that you can elect a progressive candidate. And I'm proud to be among a growing list of individuals who believe that the criminal justice system has to be reformed, and that we're people like myself who've been practicing law for 27 years, sat as a judge. We have to look at the reality of it is the only way we're going to reform the system is we become part of that system on the other side. I spent 27 years defending criminals, and now I have the opportunity to change the way cases are prosecuted, the way people are charged, and the way we look at people from the standpoint of a criminal justice system, and move away from this punitive system, which is not working.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a couple of different questions. One is, I think it would be good for you to explain what. I mean, this is a powerful position. It really directly influences people's lives in 4 counties south of Atlanta, and I think it would be useful for people to understand why this, to overcome the voter fatigue, why this is so significant to have somebody in that position. And then the other question maybe to Mr. Solomon is how this grassroots effort has been working, I guess I'll just kind of throw everything in. How the other thing that I'd like to know is the shift in the voter in the voting population that you alluded to. So let me just let you kind of go at that, at all 3 of those. Why is this position so important and so significant?
Go ahead.
It's significant because this position is one of those positions that has the ability to impact everybody at a local level. The DA has almost unlimited power when it comes to deciding what charges to bring against an individual, who to bring charges against, how those charges are crafted. The DA has the power to really influence the culture of a community. Whether or not the district attorney engages in what I believe the long-standing process of punitive prosecution, where they treat all criminals the same, or whether we have a DA like Deborah Gonzalez and others, including myself, who believe that punitive prosecutorial model is antiquated. We've got to move to a place where we utilize more pretrial diversion programs. We got to expand our accountability courts so that people who have issues with drug addiction and alcohol, mental health issues, issues related to being veterans, those people can get help. Those people can get back on track, and they're not treated like criminals. I say all the time, I believe there are 2 types of individuals that end up in the criminal justice system. You've got probably 10 to 15% of people who enter the criminal justice system who are just hardcore criminals. The best way you're going to deal with them is lock them up, and sometimes lock them up for life. But the vast majority, 85% of people who come in contact with the criminal justice system, they're just people who make a mistake, and they make these mistakes based on a tremendous number of economic and social factors. And we've got to have compassion towards these people so that we don't punish them. You can't punish people for life. The DA has the power to. One of the issues that we've been working here recently is this issue of the school to prison pipeline, where now what we're seeing is young people in school systems who get involved in certain infractions that traditionally may have been dealt with through suspension or expulsion. They now face criminal charges. And so and that's just not something that resource officers should be involved in schools. They shouldn't be involved in disciplinary issues. They're there to protect the teachers, protect the students from attacks, school shootings. They're not there because a teacher is unable to control unable to control a situation with a student that's not violent.
Yeah, let me ask you a side question. I'm not sure about the scope of the DA, but does the district attorney also have a jurisdiction over what they call white collar crime, and what's your attitude? Because I think that the issue of white collar crime may be the reverse, in which 85% of those people are really hardcore, so I just leave that out there because it's a big part of what affects people, landlords and corporate polluters and people who violate labor law. Those kind of things. I'd like to know what's your attitude and your view towards that.
When I look at the legal system certainly tends to target individuals from lower socioeconomic statuses. So when you're talking about white collar crimes, oftentimes those cases aren't even prosecuted. And we need to change that because people are able to treat individuals less than human. And so we have to have that focus, even though most quote unquote white crime cases, the more significant ones, they're going to be tried at the federal level and not necessarily at the local level. But there are a lot of instances where the DA could change the culture in a community as it relates to charging individuals, as you mentioned, a landlord who is not providing decent housing, but somebody who code violations. The DA could certainly work in concert with the solicitor and others to deal with issues such as that, and that's within the purview of that position.
I'll ask you some other questions about hiring personnel and all of those other things, because that's obviously something. I don't know how large that district attorney's office is, but I imagine that there are quite a few ADAs and folks like that. But let me ask Mr. Solomon how he's doing on the campaign front, on the mobilization and organizing. How's that going for you, sir?
It's going really well for this reason. We organized here in Spalding County back in September, and we've had a ground crew on the ground since September 15th. And Reverend Winbish hired the same crew. When we finished up in January, we hired a crew of experienced staffers, and they are on the ground today, passing out flyers and trying to increase awareness. This campaign is about making people aware that there is an election in February, and then passing out literature that engages them in the fact that we've won twice. We've won the presidency and we've won the 2 Georgia seats. And we have one advertisement that's going out that says, "Let's win again." And then we tell a little bit about the platform, the goal that Reverend Winbish goal is to ensure that justice is done in a fair and impartial manner. And we've segmented our campaign in terms of the haves and the have-nots and the people that are being mostly affected by the justice system. And we have another flyer that we'll send it out targeted to the Black community that says, "Save our Black boys, Winbish for DA." And then we go into explaining to them that the DA decides if cops are prosecuted in cases of brutality. And then we have another big issue of our newspaper. We have produced our fourth edition will come out on the 28th. That's next week. Has been very popular in this community because there have not been a newspaper targeted at the Black community or targeted for Democrats since the 1940s here in this area.
Wow.
Now, in the runoff campaign and in the November campaign, we were able to increase voting by 3,000 votes each time. And we only had a 6% decrease in voting in the runoff election. So we've done really well, and we've invested a lot of money in this campaign. We've actually raised $86,000 that we've put into the other two campaigns just to educate voters. And the reason why people were not voting here in Spalding County is they had to always make a choice between two evils. And so they never went to the poll because there were no Democrats on the poll. And once we put some Democrats and gave them a reason to vote, they've started voting. And that's what we're really thinking, that all of the effort that we spent on the last two campaigns, if we really get out there, and it's very difficult for us to physically be out there. One of our locations closed down this morning because of COVID. Several restaurants here in this area has closed down. The schools have closed down because of COVID. So we have to be very careful in how we maneuver out on the ground. So we have to be a distance from people. So we've got to communicate with media, social media. We've got to communicate by, we can't do door knocking, but we can take things to doors and door posts and things of that nature. So those are the type of things that we are doing. The people here really are getting educated on voting, and we're working with them. But the fact that they see that their votes count, that's the important part, that every vote counts. And through our newspaper, we do a newspaper, and we say, this is a copy of it. It says, this is up to you, Spalding County. But this time around, we're saying it's up to you, Spalding County, Pike County, Upson County, and Fayette County. And we are distributing 10,000 copies of this, 2,500 copies here in Spalding County. We're talking about hard print, but we also distribute this paper via social media through our computer, email. We have an email list that we send it to. And of course, we're putting 5,000 copies in Fayette County and dividing the other 2,000 copies between Upson and Pike. So I'm feeling really good about the election. Our first week of early voting here in Spalding County was very low, 576 votes in 4 days of voting. But here's the good news. We looked at the data over the 4 counties of Spalding, Pike, Upson, and Fayette. We actually, when we put all the votes together, we increased by 12%. In the last election, and our Republican friends, they decreased by 20%. So it was only 2,000 votes different. The Republicans had a 2,000 vote advantage. That's all. And so this race can be won. We've just got to get more people. We've got to get more print literature out there. We've got to do more phone calling. We've got to do more text messaging. We can get the people out, but it's going to be work over the next 2 weeks.
Let me ask you just a couple of, is there still mail-in voting? The deadline is not passed yet. So that's one way for people to vote. Could you tell us some of the details so people know, that kind of thing? Go ahead.
What we've done is for mail-in voting, we've reached out to people that we knew based upon the work that we've done over the last 4 months that are homebound, and we have delivered request forms. You have to request this time around. If you're 65 and older, you do not automatically receive a ballot in the mail. And I think we've only, in the last 4 days, I think it's been like 30 ballots is all that's been requested. And so we're only going for people who are homebound and can't get to the poll. There are no lines at the poll. So you can walk in and you can vote very quickly and get out. So we are encouraging, because of time and because of all the different issues with the post office and so forth, if you are able, take the chance and go out and vote. And so, but we are, if there's anyone that's homebound that we know of, we deliver a request form to them. I personally delivered several in the community that I live of people that I knew couldn't go to the poll. And many of them were not even aware that there was an election. So, so it's not something that's going to help us in this particular election. Mail-in ballots is not going to be a big factor.
How about harassment, voter suppression, things like that? Is that an issue? Because that's really great news that people can just walk in with almost no wait. That you're expecting on February 9th is election day, right? Tuesday, February.
That is correct. That is correct.
And is there any shenanigans going on that you are aware of that you might alert people to?
Well, we've had harassment at the election office, but I think we've got it under control in that particular arena. What happened here in Spalding County on election day, the machines did not start up for about an hour and a half. And all of us I'm an engineer and you all are professionals. When you have all the machines go down, there's got to be a common problem that's unique to all of them. And we just figured it out because the machines didn't start up here. The Secretary of State jumped to conclusions and wanted to fire the election supervisor. And then, of course, there was some here that harassed the election board and so forth. But I think I helped solve that problem, helped mitigate it by speaking to a group of them at the board meeting and told them that they were behaving like thugs. They had actually won the election in our county in terms of Republican had more votes. And here you are harassing the election. I should be doing that. But you know what I did this morning? I brought in 7 more applications, registered 7 new voters. And I'm the loser, and you're the winner, and you're up here harassing the election board. So things have been calm around there since this mob has been tried. But we have not had any harassment out in the field. And one of the reasons why we didn't is because of 18 precincts that we have, 3 precincts are predominantly Black precincts that do not vote. So we spent all of our time in those neighborhoods where we were welcome. And therefore, we have not been out in the public arena doing a lot with the public where we could be seen. And so that has worked by advantage.
Yeah. Robbie, you want to jump in? We have about 3 more minutes. Go ahead and jump in.
Sure, I'll be quick. Actually, thank you for all the info. It's been really helpful. I just have 2 questions. So I was looking on where the counties are. They're all kind of South Georgia, rural Georgia. And 3 questions. 1, are you from Georgia? 2nd, you've been practicing for 27 years on the defense side. So what exactly were the patterns that you saw that are currently a problem, obviously, while you're running, and that you want to change? And what are the actual action items that you intend on running that will change those current problems for people? And the last question is, how involved is the DNC and I guess the Republican National in this? How involved have they gotten in local politics? So just those three. Go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, I'm from Greensboro, Georgia, native Georgian. Come from a family 2 generations removed from being sharecroppers. My great grandfather was one of the ones who was able to purchase his 40 acres and a mule. So I come from that stock. In terms of what I've seen over the years as a municipal court judge and as a private attorney, I've seen a system that unfairly treats people of color, minorities, women, and the underserved populations. And that's what I'm trying to change. I think it's time out for the same political agenda as it relates to criminal justice. We've got to have criminal justice reform. You know, one of the things 2 years ago in my courtroom, we stopped prosecuting simple possession cases involving marijuana. We decriminalized it. We moved to a platform where individuals did online education. They paid a fine, and if they were eligible, we sentenced them under the conditional discharge statute, which meant after a year, the case was dismissed. Those are the type of things that I want to bring to the DA's office. As I stated before, more uses of the accountability courts, more uses of pretrial diversion programs. Right now in my courtroom, 85% of our cases are resolved by our pretrial diversion programs. And so 85% of our defendants end up having their cases resolved without an actual conviction. One of the things that I want to push is the issue of expanding the use of a records restriction. People get convictions on their record that last for 20 and 30 years, have nothing to do with who they are today. We've got to expand Georgia's records restriction law so that people can get a fresh start. As it relates to the Democratic Party, locally, we've got the state Democratic Party is involved in this campaign. They're giving us support. Also, we got the support of the Spalding, Fayette, Pike, and Upson County Democratic parties. So we've got a wide array of support across this area, because what we're trying to do is ferret out that good old boy network that has allowed this position to be held captive for the last 21 years. My opponent talks about that she's our DA. When I hear her say our DA, I spent nearly 5 years. I spent nearly 5 years monitoring the Ku Klux Klan in my early days. And when I hear our DA, that's a code word for me. That's a bell whistle. What she's actually saying is that we don't need people that come outside the community come in and disrupt what we've got going on.
Do you have a position? I'm here in Atlanta, and we have a lot of discussion on defund the police and closing the jail, reallocating funding for social services. Do you have a position on the defund the police? And we have, a ridiculous amount with the DA in Atlanta of police brutality cases that have still been unresolved, even after our elections. I'm just curious if you have thoughts on that. And I was really grateful, on a side note, and I'm wrapping it up, Tamara, to hear you talk about holistic and housing. That's my wheelhouse. And as just in looking at where your counties are, I can see that what happens in Atlanta and all the displacement of really predominantly who you're talking about, people of color, lower income people with less resources, it's all going south. So do you have a vision plan, coalition plan, building in terms of housing and the people that are coming from Atlanta and what they're going to do in rural Georgia, where you have you have limited economics?
I don't want to use the word fortunate, but I was here when there was the whole exit of people from public housing from the city of Atlanta into the suburbs with very little support. They were promised they made promises that they could come back, and they were not able to go back because they put in housing with new types of restrictions that they couldn't qualify for. Those people are still out here in these communities. They don't have access to transportation. They don't have access to education, and they're struggling. And I think the DA's office should be a community partner, and that's what I want to bring to the DA's office: a community partnership where we respect and we honor those that we serve.
So do you have a position on the closing of the jails and the defund the police?
Let me just point out that that these counties are directly south of Clayton County, right, Reverend Winbish? So we're not talking about, way out. They're in the kind of the V between 85 running southwest and 75 running southeast. And so they're very close. They really are very close by. And I think Robbie's point that there are in effect gentrifying refugees from gentrification that are living in these areas is really an important point to make to those of us in Atlanta and other areas of why this is so important for us to support, your candidacy and the grassroots rank and file work that county people like Mr. Solomon are doing. So it's I'm so glad that you came on. So grateful that you were able to make the time to bring this this really crucial race to the attention of this the group of people that listens in on us. So.
Did he answer? Did the Reverend? That's okay.
Yeah.
Did the Reverend answer on the police brutality and the defund the police or reallocation? I just want to get an official.
Okay. In terms of police brutality, I think the DA's office is the most critical position in dealing with police brutality. One of the issues we have here in the past in this circuit is there is not stringent enough enforcement on the use of body cams. And body cams are one of the ways that we're able to get the information that we need to make the decision to charge police officers who go beyond the color of authority. I've been a big proponent of having police held accountable for their actions. I think that there's a cultural issue that has to be dealt with that. In terms of, I don't support the use of the term defund the police. I believe in asset reallocation. I think that we have to reallocate funding to deal with the issues that undergird the problems that we have in this country, whether it's poverty, whether it's mental health. That's where more funding needs to go. If we do that, that's going to clear up more resources to deal with the violent crimes, the aggravated assaults, the murders. And that's what we need to be. We need to be focused on. How do we get to a place where we can deal with the serious offenses, but at the same time have compassion for individuals? And that's been my slogan, compassion, civility, and common sense. And I think that's what's missing in our criminal justice system right now, compassion, civility, and common sense. And we've got to take a more holistic approach to dealing with this issue because it just doesn't affect criminals. It affects their families. They go to jail and now grandmama's at home raising babies that, putting additional stress on those households. So that's
thank you for answering.
We have to wrap it up. I want to thank you, Attorney Judge Dexter Winbush. Thank you for joining us on this broadcast. You are definitely welcome to come back. We know that the election day is Tuesday, February the 9th. So if you want to come back that Saturday prior to help us we can help rally the troops and get people to the polls, please come back and share your campaign and your candidacy with us.
Thank you. Mr. Solomon, thanks for your work.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Solomon, for your work as well. Thank you. Have a good morning. Our next guest is here, Mr. Ken. Good morning. You're muted. Let me unmute you. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Good morning. Good morning. We missed you. Happy New Year, sir. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Hopefully everyone's doing well.
Yes, Mr. K. Will Services. How have you been?
I've been knee deep in law school with torts, criminal law and contracts, but I'm making my way through it and stuff. So that's keeping me entertained, of course.
Yeah. Well, I wanted you to come on the heels of this gentleman talking about his campaign and his candidacy. I'm gonna share my screen because I wanted you to talk about this 8 Can't Wait. and, you know, bring us up to speed on what's going on with law enforcement across this country.
Certainly, certainly. You know, I think Judge Dexter Wimbush, you know, he's a great candidate. His answering the questions was very straightforward as far as even criminal justice reform, and the fact that you know, he can have his own personal beliefs as far as, you know, the defund the police, the caption defund the police. You know, I think the caption of defunding the police is important because it catches the attention of people out there who may not want to pay attention to these things. For instance, you know, defunding the police and hiring more social workers to deal with mental health issues. Police respond, an overwhelming number of their calls for service are to people who are, you know, suffering a mental health kind of condition. And police aren't clinicians. They're not doctors. They're not clinicians. They're not social workers or licensed social workers. And it's outside of their profession, actually, to be able to treat a lot of those people. And unfortunately, we have seen it time and time again where when police have responded, because they're using the tools within their tool belt, which are to control people, sometimes we have people that perish from that exercise of control. Sometimes it's wrongfully done. And it's important for us to highlight the fact that defunding the police isn't a negative, it's a positive. Every good cop, I'm a former law enforcement professional, homicide detective, every good cop out there understands that trying to have police take on too many tasks means that you're basically placing too much burden on the police officers, and it's outside of their realm of profession. They can't get the job done. Have the cops go out there and chase you know, bank robbers, murderers, and people who are committing, you know, felonious type crimes that, you know, are making people feel or fear crime, and they don't feel like they're safe and stuff like that. Chase after serial rapists or rapists out there. Chase after those, you know, those type of people, and let the police do that, and let social workers take care of the people who just need to go and, you know, get to a hospital and see a doctor and maybe see a clinician or something like that.
So what are your thoughts on this 8 Can't Wait? 8 Can't Wait is a campaign to bring immediate change to police department, and talking about the requires de-escalation, the use of force contortum. Am I saying that right? Bans chokeholds and strangleholds, require warning before shooting, ban shooting at moving vehicles, exhaust all alternatives, duty to intervene, and comprehensive reporting.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, these are all great points, but many issues in law enforcement, you know, regarding discrimination. People of color and white people have not had a shared experience as far as law enforcement goes. Officer friendly in the white community can transition over in the same shift to a black neighborhood 1 block over, or predominantly black neighborhood, and then all of a sudden become the warrior cop. And then that warrior cop who goes out there and commits, you know, some sort of excessive force in carrying out their duties against that citizen, also has what's called, you know, law enforcement protections. The Bill of Rights is what people should be looking at, because under the Bill of Rights for many law enforcement officers, for instance, in the state of Maryland, was the first state after the 1964 Civil Rights Act was passed, I believe in 1972 or so, was the first state in the nation to pass a law enforcement officer Bill of Rights. What that meant was, after we went through the monumental civil rights era, where we have people being beat after the Great March across Pettus Bridge, and they're being beat on the other side just simply for exercising their First Amendment right, exercising it without any kind of problems out there. They were beat up by the police. The law enforcement officers in this country after the 1964 Civil Rights Act went out and gave themselves extraordinary, through legislative acts, extraordinary abilities to avoid being held responsible for their acts. And that is at the genesis, I believe, at the root cause of many of the issues that we're facing here. If you have a police chief that's trying to fire a bad cop, for instance, in the state of Maryland, they have to wait based on a due process process for that police officer. They have to wait until there's an adjudication administratively, there's an adjudication criminally. And then after the adjudication, let's say, for instance, criminally, the officer is found guilty. They then have to take the officer administratively to fire that officer. These due process rights that are afforded police are extraordinary. They're almost on the same level as Trump. Trump ran around for the last 4 years saying that he could basically commit murder in the middle of the street as a president and not be held accountable. Law enforcement officers in this country, many of them feel like they have that type of same power. And we have to take that back by stripping away some of these law enforcement protections.
So Ken, this is a bill that I've been doing on YouTube. I started another little spinoff to this on Mondays, Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, 7 p.m. Eastern. I've been on YouTube keeping up with Congress. And this bill came across, HR 155, to establish licensing standards for law enforcement. And I really wanted to get your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, licensing standards are great. I'm just saying that law enforcement, for some strange reason, and we have to go and not buy into the system that this is a training issue or it's a standards issue. If it were a standards issue, white people would have a similar experience as those Black, Latino, and brown folks out there that are getting clubbed or unarmed and they're shot. They would have a similar experience. The issue in law enforcement is not a training issue. It is a discretion issue. The discretion is being protected based on the bills that, or the police protections, the privacy rights that are being granted to these officers. Those have to be stripped away in order to have equality, inequality in policing that's equal across the board. Until we strip away those issues, which are protecting the bad people who are within the rank and file of law enforcement, we're going to be spinning and going around in circles here. But standards across the board federally would be nice, but that still doesn't touch upon the issues that I'm raising as the primary issue.
Robin, you want to jump in right there?
No, I'm always fascinated listening to Ken, and I think exactly what he's stating. It's the old premise that you can't legislate how people feel. Like, personally, how people feel threatened by Black men predominantly and women. And so we go right back to, kind of race, and you can't legislate that. So in Atlanta, we have the Office of Professional Standards, which is now being reviewed. I mean, they've kind of been, to Ken's point, and I hate to say it like this, I'm not trying to sound disrespectful, but almost a joke. You went there as it was just rhetoric to get cleared. I mean, I've been through that process in the Office of Professional Standards with an officer who was on camera brutalizing a woman, and then all the other officers who did reports falsified their reports. And when I met personally with the Office of Professional Standards, they were basically there almost to catch me to protect their officers, similarly to the way that a police union would protect at all regard. And so I think what Ken is saying, to his point, is that we have to dismantle, not only in a federal statute way, but we have to get into the race relations of the country. I really, really hope that the Reverend Wimbush, if he does win, he looks into the economics, because that South Side component and people who are going south, I mean, we've said this over and over. In Atlanta, we have our mayor, Buckhead, wants to kind of kick off to a whole new city due to crime. And the majority of the crime, especially among youth, is over money. And it's a time-sensitive issue, because how things are set up on the South Side, especially in rural Georgia, it has to do with land allocation and who's going to get those jobs. And if we wait till later, by that time the land is purchased and how the economics are executed is done. So to everyone's point, it's holistic. But I'm glad to hear that Ken's in law school and that we'll have an army in him alone as an attorney with a law degree, especially given his background. That's just my take on it. I mean,
David.
I appreciate that.
Well, I think there are a couple of things I wish I had gotten to ask Reverend Wimbush a couple of these questions about how much, this is my wheelhouse, about how much the reforms can be argued are in the interests of working class European American folks. It is clear and this is kind of the tension that Ken and I have kind of running through our conversations, between the fact that this is that the injustices of the justice system are focused on people of color, and particularly African Americans, versus what the role of working class whites is in that mix. They seem to have divided interests. What I'd like to know is like a separate question, is the role of the police unions, and the fact that police officers have, for people whose educational requirements, let's say, are a high school degree for the most part, right, Ken? I mean, I think that's pretty much the case around the country. They have a really lucrative, in terms of personal remuneration, career that they are engaged in, and on top of that, they can retire if they start out in their late teens or early 20s. They can retire with a pension that's going to last for decades, right? During which time they can take up another career, as is the case with you, Ken. I mean, you're so there is an enormous amount of financial resources, of government financial resources that goes into these things. I wonder, what your thoughts are, how you would comment on that, and is that something that we can do something about, to change this? I mean, the cops go out, when they've got 20 years of service, the last couple of years they're given multiple hours a week of overtime so that they can max out their final salaries, which is what their pensions are based on. I mean, this is all it's all perfectly legal, but ethically, it means an extra burden on the whole system. And so, if we're talking about defunding the police, anyway, let me stop there. I'll let you express your thoughts on how we deal with that conundrum.
Sure. Let me pick that apart a little bit. I have a little feedback on my end. Do you hear the feedback?
Okay. I just muted everybody's mic so we can hear you.
Okay. I think what we have to do is take that apart in pieces. First off, when we think about since 1970, in 1964, let's say, for instance, there were 200,000 law enforcement officers in the country. Throughout the entire era of the civil rights era, 200,000 law enforcement officers up until 1968 or so were in law enforcement in this country. Today, we have grown that 5 times. There are over 1 million law enforcement officers in the country today. So that in itself comes with costs. When we move forward and we look at the 1994 crime bill that was passed, the 1994 crime bill tasked the Department of Justice with overseeing pattern and practice of discrimination within law enforcement, and to also investigate law enforcement agencies throughout the country. Since 1994, there's been more than $2 trillion poured into law enforcement. $2 trillion. So think about whether or not since 1970 versus 1994 to present day, if we had poured 2 trillion or 3 trillion into education. Most of the people that I had to go out and police for major crimes as a homicide detective, many of them didn't graduate high school. I wonder what their trajectory would have been like if they had graduated high school. I wonder, you know, when I look at the statistics of people who are in prison, most of them don't have PhDs. Most of them never graduated high school. So, you know, as a statistic, when we're looking at trying to correct long-standing issues, long-term problems, and find solutions to long-standing issues, in this country, education has always been a critical component to trying to go and correct the trajectory of people who are, you know, falling through the cracks. And for this country to have poured more money into law enforcement as a system to control people rather than invest in children, that economically was a very poor decision. We have to decide going forward as a country if we're going to continue to make those poor decisions. In terms of the people who are within law enforcement, many of them go out, just like I did, and try to do the best they can with the tools that they're afforded. And they do, many of them do an exemplary job. I don't want to make it sound like as if all of the people in law enforcement are horrible people. But we do have a large segment in law enforcement who are horrible people, who are unfit and should not be in law enforcement. And we should not be paying their salaries, and we certainly should not be paying their pensions. I have a problem with those folks receiving a pension. I was a person in uniform that got shot at twice in the line of duty, had to go and use deadly force against a person trying to kill me. And that shared experience is not a common experience amongst many Americans or many cops out there for that instance. So therefore, that job in itself comes with a level of experience that most people in their lifetime, fortunately, will never have to endure. So trying to think about it in terms of comparing it to being a stockbroker on Wall Street, riding the dips and ebbs and flows in the economic system versus someone that's going out there and policing, two different types of jobs, two different types of criteria, and therefore two different experiences that will never be shared. So I don't think we should be looking at trying to touch what is a retirement system for law enforcement based on the types of sacrifices that many people in uniform make. For instance, the people in DC at the Capitol Police, some of them were bad apples within the bunch of many good law enforcement officers that tried their best to do a good job, and many of them were overwhelmed with a criminal element, felonious criminal element that overwhelmed their system. Some of them probably feel like, wow, we were betrayed by some of the people within our organization as well. That said, majority of the people out there tried their best on that day, January 6th, to protect and serve. What we have to also deal with on the flip side of this is the fact that going forward, if we understand that law enforcement is not suffering a lack of training, there have been billions of dollars poured into law enforcement for training. There have been billions of dollars poured into law enforcement recently in the past 8 or so years to introduce body-worn cameras to try to go and ferret out the bad apples. We still have those bad apples turning off mics, turning off cameras, and they're doing it with impunity. That is an issue. We cannot continue to pour money into something to hold someone ethically and morally accountable to the people, the taxpayers that are paying their salaries, the taxpayers that are providing them all of the tools that they need to make sure that they can do the job well. And we have these bad apples that are identified on camera doing things that are against their own internal policies and should be criminal, getting away with it. That is what we should be correcting. That, I believe, is what we should be talking about.
Robbie, you have a question for Ken? Unmute your mic.
He kind of brought it up just for a minute, and I completely agree with you, Ken. I think that if we held people accountable and we were public about it, which obviously we would need agencies that function outside of a, good old boy network or whatever to do that, then other people would stop behaving in these criminal ways, like turning off their camera or covering for dirty cops or brutalizing people, because then they'd actually be at risk, or they would leave the network that's covering for them, because they would no longer be able to behave badly without exposure. But I am curious, and I'm sorry because I'm backtracking a little. given your background, given everything you know about the legal system, what do you think of the attack on the Capitol? What do you think happened there with those folks? I'm still baffled by it, but I'm very curious how you see that.
Yeah, the attack on the Capitol was a well orchestrated, well planned event that starts from the president down. The government influenced those people to be out there that day. The same government that's supposed to be protecting everybody is the government that influenced those people, 30,000 or so strong, to go out there and say that they could exercise a right to go and capture the Capitol. And they did. We have to go and be straightforward about it. They actually captured the Capitol. For if it was a couple hours or 5 minutes, it doesn't matter. They overwhelmed it. They captured it. It was their property for a moment. And then they had to go and, give it up. But at the end of the day, as terrorists, they met their objective that day. They disrupted the flow of government. And for that matter, for us to still be debating since January 6th whether or not this was terrorism, I haven't seen a criminal charge being, a person being charged with a Patriot Act, a domestic terrorist act. Yet and still, they disrupted government. They took over government. They instilled fear in people who were, congressional leaders there that were trying to go and do the work of the people. So why hasn't anyone who's, been responsible or charged with a crime been charged with terrorism? And that's another problem that we have in this country. Many, many white folks out here have committed acts of terror against communities of color for many years and have not had to go and face the consequences for their acts, for their planning of those acts, for their commission of those acts, for their accessory to those acts, for the aiding and abetting to those acts. Until we get to those hard questions and answers, I don't see how we can hold people to a standard that will actually have them change their conduct. Because ultimately, we can punish people, but we're trying to change their conduct, and we're trying to change the conduct of others who see those people being punished. We should punish them to the fullest extent of the law.
I noticed you use the term government, not Trump. So now that Trump is out of office, do you have thoughts on that? Do you think this is over because Trump is leaving, but you use government? So can you elaborate a little?
The government has always betrayed the Black people. I mean, we had enslavement in this country that the government was responsible for promoting. The government sent marshals out to go and grab people from one state to another state to bring them back to another state. The government actually, took in through the Treasury monies based on taxes, based on every head that was out there that was within the system. Today, the government uses the same process, but we send people to jail. And those people go out and they do slave labor while they're in jail. So the government is responsible. And it has nothing to do with Trump. It has everything to do with the government. It has everything to do with what we have a government for, which is to protect us. And if the government is not protecting us all equally, if the government has a system in place that is protecting white people, their rights, and it's also controlling Black people to go and build wealth for white people, that is not a government that is going to be very favorable to Black people. And Black people have been complaining for a very long time, several hundred years for the matter of fact.
Yeah, I think, Ken, that the other aspect of this is that there weren't 40,000 people who stormed the Capitol. There were maybe 3,000 or so of the hardcore, and there was clearly planning that was involved in that. I wonder if you would agree with me, because I see these people not simply as terrorists, but as a lynch mob. The whole premise for what they were doing was that, in effect, that Black and other people of color's votes were illegitimate. That the message that they were connecting was voter fraud equals is the same as giving equal access to people of color to the right to vote. As opposed to it being for most of the history of this country a racial privilege for whites. And so the language, the rhetoric that they were using, hunting down Nancy Pelosi, hang Mike Pence. It really has, to me, the whole tone and tenor of the lynch mobs of the Jim Crow era. So I don't know how, if you agree with me, about that, but I really think that we have to hold both of those aspects. That domestic terror has always been the privilege of whites in this country to be able to get away with it. Anyway, that's just a final observation that I have.
I think Dave, you're raising excellent points, but let me throw it back in a reverse pattern so that you can understand it maybe how I see it. You have 40,000. I'll go with your number. 40,000 people out there, and let's say it's 3,000 storming the Capitol. Not once have I seen a video of any of the 40 or 37,000 trying to stop the 3,000.
Right.
Haven't.
No.
So if I have 40,000 people out there and 3,000 of them are the principal hardcore people that are storming the Capitol, and I've got 37,000 people out there, and I got maybe 1,000 police officers out there, where are the good citizens at that join the forces of the police officers to stop the 3,000 terrorists?
Absolutely. No, I agree.
That's the reason why I'm saying aiding, abetting, conspiracy, participants that are actively engaged in helping the 3,000 people. It should be 40,000 people facing some jail time on this, not 3,000, not 100. They all are contributing to the same outcome. If I can't see a video of them out there trying to assist the police, then they are helping the terrorists.
And Ken, I want to thank you for joining us. We're at the top of the hour. You are always our go-to for policing in America. Tell us real quick, Ken, when you finish and you get this degree, what's next?
I'll figure it out on the way. I mean, as you know, Tamara, I mean, the law is so vast. It covers you have to go from A to Z on it. There's no, shortcuts in between. And, I'll figure out what the next steps are. But I mean, I got a few years to go before I get there. I'm going to have some fun along the way and just try to go and, learn everything that I can and be a doctor of the law.
There it is. I get it. That's exactly, with me having a Juris Master's. It's like I wanted to be able to have a sense of understanding. I get it. I totally get it. So thank you for joining us. Like I say, you are always our go-to for policing in America. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Great.
All right, David and Robbie, we had a full broadcast this morning, y'all. We're at the top of the hour. I want to thank Ken for joining us. I want to thank Judge and soon to be elected DA of Pike, Upson, Spalding, and Fayette counties. It was a great interview this morning. So thank you, David, for following up on that.
Yeah. And I hope we can have him back because this could be a really, really critical race for putting in position a person who could really make such a big difference in the lives of ordinary folks in those 4 counties. So great. It's great that we were able to do that.
Every week we give voice.
We didn't.
David, we gotta go. It's at the top of the hour.
We put up something about where to make campaign contributions.
Okay, we'll put that in the thread. We'll get his email address, his website, and put that in the thread. But thank you for joining us, everybody. Every week we give voice to issues, activists, and activism right here in the great state of Georgia. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. You can find me at tamarashealy.com. You can find Mr. David right here on Facebook at Acknowledge the Divide, and you can find the beautiful Miss Robbie Caban at robbiecaban.com. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week. And you'll see me on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday on YouTube, 7 p.m., Keeping Up with Congress. Have a great week, everybody.
Solidarity forever means privileges never.